When we look into the amazing discoveries, we can't miss out on Mesopotamia, can we? Nope, we cannot. So what exactly makes Mesopotamia stand out? Well, it's the cradle of civilization, so it's got to have some surprises, right? Yes, a great deal of important discoveries and innovations originated in Mesopotamia. Agriculture started in this area. Farming started here. So that means there's got to be more. Yes, there is, and we'll be getting into that in today's episode. As we said before, the development of agriculture allowed people to live in one area for a longer amount of time without having to rely on hunting. So we have to accept that is indeed a great accomplishment. Let's get to number 11, the plow. We all know agriculture is one of the most crucial components of a basic civilization, but where does cultivation stand without the tools? While some men in Mesopotamia tamed the ox, others created the ard, or you could call it the first plow. The first plow was heavy and made of wood. The main issue with the plow was that the dirt would adhere to it and had to be physically scraped off. Additionally, it failed in tall grass. The development of the plow in Mesopotamia allowed hunter-gatherer societies to remain in one location and rely more on agriculture than hunting for their sustenance. Got it? Number 10, the wheel. Alright, I'll say this is the best out of all. Come on, take a look around you. Everything's on wheels, bro. The wheel is frequently used as an example of human creativity since it has proven to be one of the greatest gifts to humanity. Almost all contemporary means of transportation employ it, including simple carts, cycles, motorbikes, and vehicles, as well as trucks, trams, trains, and airplanes. The wheel has made the idea of the world as a global community a reality by allowing people to travel great distances quickly. Around 3500 BC, a brainy Homo sapiens living in Mesopotamia had an idea. The wheel, possibly the greatest innovation in human history, was created when he cut a disc from a tree trunk and drilled a hole through it. However, the wheel he created was only utilized for making pottery, so that's the story of the wheel. Number 9, soap. The Mesopotamian people are also credited with the development of soap. The earliest soap evidence was discovered and is thought to date around 2800 BC, when many civilizations and cultures created some of the contemporary innovations thousands of years ago. The Mesopotamian area created a cleaning substance that is now known as soap. They created it by combining water with a certain quantity of wood ash and animal fats. To clean clothing or other items that they regarded as filthy and unclean, they used soap. Different types of solvents have been developed with various cleaning properties and formulations, but people used all of those and adapted them. Their soap formulations were exported all over the world and benefited many countries. So the next time you are in the bathroom, try recalling where your soap name came from. Nah, just kidding. Number 8, time. The idea of time was developed by Mesopotamian culture. At first, they suggested the passing of time. According to studies, the time system we use today was created by humans in the Mesopotamian area. It is also true that certain ancient civilizations and countries had developed the idea of time. The most practical and accessible design, however, was based on the 60 system, which is still in use. They not only created the idea of time, but also the concepts of past, present, and future. This was done in order to assess the situation. For numerous months and years, the Mesopotamia people kept a close eye on the passing of time. They discovered that there are some predictable gaps between days and nights that vary depending on the weather. First, they created a straightforward system that merely utilized time intervals. Later, they created a sophisticated time system including seconds, minutes, and hours. These units were all well defined. The time idea we use today was originally called the base 60 time technique since it included 60 seconds and 60 minutes. Number 7, the whole concept of urbanization. The idea of urbanization was created for the first time in history by the inhabitants of Mesopotamia. They put out the idea of settling in a certain region or area of land. This was only feasible because of agriculture, which the Mesopotamians also developed. They would have to relocate if there was insufficient food to feed both people and animals. As a result, they created a little urban area where a certain number of people once resided. They also had a fully functioning tax system in addition to their own manner of life and transportation. The urban areas, which featured little dwellings and farms, were constructed using tiny bricks. Later, the idea of urbanization spread quickly throughout the world, and practically every civilization embraced it. So it was a great idea that came from Mesopotamia. Number 6, metal fabrication. Metals are strong, but shaping them accordingly is the most crucial part of their application. Mesopotamia and the people in its neighborhood are credited with inventing metal production. The inhabitants of Mesopotamia were so highly developed in every aspect of life that they discovered and invented several metal objects that are still in use today. They were highly developed and extremely knowledgeable about metal like iron, gold, and copper. Along with having an understanding of metals, they also devised metalworking and produced several pots, swords, and food holders. Copper was the first metal made, and it dates back many thousand years. Mesopotamian people cast it in a mold to create certain useful items. They first simply produced a few basic plates and weaponry. Later, they began producing slightly more complex pots, jugs, and jars. Number 5. Sailboats. When do you guys think were the first sailboats made? Well, sailboats too started out in Mesopotamia. Actually, they were reed boats to be precise. The earliest known example of a purposefully built sailing ship is a reed boat from Mesopotamia, which dates to the early Neolithic Ubaid civilization, around 5500 BCE. Tiny but important long-distance trade between the developing settlements of the Fertile Crescent and the Arabian Neolithic towns of the Persian Gulf is said to have been made possible by the small-masted Mesopotamian boats. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were followed by boatmen as they flowed down the Saudi, Bahraini, and Qatari shores and into the Persian Gulf. When Ubaidian pottery was discovered at a large number of coastal Persian Gulf sites in the middle of the 20th century, it became clear that Ubaidian boats were entering the Persian Gulf for the first time. Number 4. The map. The most popular method for locating a location is a map, right? Maps can be quite helpful in these instances, whether you are new to a certain area or are simply exploring new places nearby. The first maps were created by Mesopotamians. The earliest map ever discovered by science dates to about 2300 BC. This map was found by a study team in the Mesopotamian area of northern Iraq. They discovered a map on some clay tabs that had been drawn by highlighting the key locales and distinguishing features. The dwelling place, the woodland, and the grounds, for instance, were all depicted on the map. It reveals that maps were created by Mesopotamian people and are still in use now. They constructed a straightforward diagram on clay. We now have more sophisticated map formats on our computers and mobile devices. Well, not every time. Google Map works all right. Number 3. Chariots. Just a sec. Who knew chariots were first made here? Of course, the wheel was made in Mesopotamia, but the chariot? Yes, another fantastic creation of the Mesopotamian people was the chariot. Its initial foundation consisted of 2 wheels fastened to a horse-like animal. Using wood and ropes, the 2-wheeled apparatus was fastened to the animal. Because there were no other viable means of transportation at the time besides animals, this was seen to be the greatest one. The chariot's original design was improved to include 4 and 6 wheels, which allowed for a larger passenger capacity. Its dual-wheel design made it speedier. The chariot was employed in both its primitive and sophisticated versions by several cultures and countries. Chariots were once used by everyone, including some of the most powerful people in the world. Chariots are still used in several parts of the world today. Number 2. Writing and mathematics. Yes, these also came up with their form of calculation and writing. In fact, it's the first form. Writing is a kind of communication that uses graphic symbols to convey ideas or messages in a particular language. The cuneiform script, the oldest known type of writing, was developed in Mesopotamia in about 3200 BC. The Latin word cuneus, which means wedge-shaped, is where the term originated. On wet clay, a word sign was created by writing with a wedge-like impression. Word concepts were then represented using what was known as phonograms. The system was used to handle routine tasks like tabulating agricultural output and other types of production. Cuneiform was the primary writing system used by all ancient Mesopotamian civilizations until the alphabet was adopted around 100 BC. Clay tablets, which were resistant to the destructive effects of time, were used by the ancient Mesopotamians. Modern academics have devoted a lot of effort to learn the language, but it has shown that it is far from simple to decipher the language. About 500,000 Mesopotamian cuneiform items have been found, but only a small portion of them have been translated thus far. There will probably be a lot more surprises. And finally, number 1, we have agriculture. In fact, this isn't just about agriculture, but also about irrigation techniques. Around 10 decades ago, during the Holocene epoch, agriculture began to evolve. Humans have spent a large portion of history hunting and gathering food. Most likely in northern Syria and Iraq, man first began to domesticate animals and cultivate crops. The ancient irrigation system is still in place. The Sumerians of prehistoric Mesopotamia created the earliest architectural feats in history by constructing temples, city walls, and canals. The Mesopotamians of antiquity relied heavily on irrigation. However, flooding was a major issue in Mesopotamia. The Euphrates and Tigris rivers carried enormous amounts of sediment, which caused the river to change its path. The Mesopotamians built levees along the riverbanks in response to flooding to stop water from pouring onto their crops. Mesopotamia was the first place where attempts to regulate floods were effective. Alright, now coming to the end of today's episode, it appears that the cradle of civilization, which we already knew about, has further secrets, and that might take some time. So until then, stay tuned to our channel for more exciting updates. Anyways, make sure to follow us, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notifications to enjoy the most exciting content.